Chapter 779. After that, everyone was divided into two teams. Gudatsi, Matthew, Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hyuga Hassan, Tranquil Hassan, Arash, and Kudo Tai Chi were in one team. Wuming, Bedivere, and Gazril were in the other team. Tang Sanzang, on the other hand, stayed behind in West Village because he did not have any combat strength. Although I can't help, I will pray to Buddha to protect you, Tang Sanzang said as he prayed for everyone. Thank you. We will definitely return successfully, Master Sanzang. Gudatsi was rather confident. We're ready. Assassin, you can begin, Gudatsi said to Wuming. Nodding, Wuming was not in a hurry to open the teleportation gate. Instead, he shouted into the void. Azrael. Yes, Master. The green-haired girl appeared out of thin air. Miss Azrael? Matthew was surprised. After all, Matthew and the others had not seen Azrael since their first meeting. Actually, Azrael has been hiding by Tachika's side under my orders to protect Tachika. After Azrael appeared, Wuming began his explanation, explaining why Gudatsi and the others had not seen Azrael except for their first meeting. I see. That person who was covering for us at the entrance of the mountain was also Azrael, right? Gudatsi widened her eyes, looking as if she had seen through everything. Indeed, it was me, Meow, Azrael replied playfully with a hint of cuteness. But Gudatsi and the others, who had seen Azrael before, did not find it funny. Gudatsi and the others had seen Gazrael's aura, and Gudatsi vaguely remembered that when she first met Azrael, Azrael had addressed her as the commander of the Sky Wings. The aura of Azrael, who was not the commander, was already very powerful. Gudatsi did not even dare to imagine how terrifying Azrael, who was the commander of Gazrael, was. However, if Wuming knew what Gudatsi was thinking, he would definitely laugh out loud. Although Azrael was the commander, the strongest individual among the Sky Wings was still an outsider, Gazrael. However, at this moment, Hassan felt that something was wrong. Hassan looked angry, his hands clenched into fists, and he stared at Azrael. Although Hundred Faces Hassan was wearing a mask, the change in the atmosphere made it clear that Hundred Faces Hassan was glaring at Azrael. Cursed Wrist Hassan pressed down on Cursed Wrist Hassan, hinting at Hundred Looks Hassan not to be impulsive. This caused most of the people present to be dumbfounded. What was going on? Could it be that there was a grudge between them? This most of the people actually referred to the naive Gudatsi, Matthew, as well as Bedivere, Arash, Itatota, Tang Sanzang, and a few others who had not come into contact with Azrael and Hassan. Gazrael looked like she was watching a good show. Her little face was flushed, and she was quite excited. This made Wuming glare at her. Whether it was Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was pressing Hassan's shoulder, Da Vinci, or even Roman in Chaldea's control room, they all basically understood what Hassan was angry about. Wuming sighed helplessly. Although this had nothing to do with him directly, it was indirectly related. The reason for Hassan's anger was smoky drunk Hassan's death. Azrael had always been with Gudatsi and the others, so as long as Azrael appeared, smoky drunk Hassan would not have to sacrifice himself. Of course, it was also wrong to resent others for not lending a helping hand, as an excuse. Hassan was a smart person. He knew that if Azrael were to save him, no one else would be able to say anything about it. It was normal for Azrael not to help because this was her duty. There was no rule that stated that she had to help when she saw injustice. In addition, Azrael was Wuming's subordinate, so Hassan chose to remain silent. This disappointed Azrael, who had noticed from the beginning that someone was hostile to her. She had hoped that the monkey would attack her, and then she could fight back openly. The Skywing species were not angels, but a species that sent others to meet angels. Therefore, it was a pity for Azrael that they couldn't fight. In the corner, Quiet Hassan put his hands on his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. Although she didn't know what had happened between Hassan and Azrael, she didn't want to cause internal strife. On one side was her compatriot, and on the other side was the subordinate of someone who was not afraid of her poison. It could be said that Quiet Hassan was the last person who wanted to see Hassan and Azrael get into a conflict. That's great, Sir Villo. Looking at Wuming's back, Quiet Hassan prayed silently. Wuming did not pay attention to Quiet Hassan. When he saw Hassan loosening his clenched fist, Wuming knew that this matter was not going to get out of hand. It was not that Wuming was gloating. It was quite unfavorable for them to have internal strife so close to the final battle. In short, I will let Azrael go with you. Azrael, it's the end, So don't be stingy with your magic power. Just do it. 100 Faces Hassan did not pursue the matter, and Wu Ming would not mention it again. It was better to just turn the page. Yes, Master. Azrael bowed slightly and accepted Wu Ming's words. Then let's go. Seeing that the atmosphere had inexplicably returned to normal, Gudatsi did not try to find out what had happened, as long as everyone was fine. Then let's begin. Wu Ming finished and snapped his fingers. Pa! The portal instantly appeared in front of Gudatsi. The black-purple ripples were like a black hole, spinning as if to suck Gudatsi in. Why do I feel a little scared? Gudatsi smiled awkwardly at Wu Ming. It's not the first time you've experienced my portal. What are you afraid of? Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Let's go, Senpai, I will protect you. Matthew conveyed his faith to Gudatsi through his firm eyes, which made Gudatsi not afraid. With Matthew around, it really makes people feel very at ease. Gudatsi hugged Matthew and rubbed against him. Matthew's face became rosy, but he did not refuse Gudatsi's closeness. What a beautiful sisterly relationship. Most of the people present thought so in their hearts. However, Wu Ming only felt that Tachibana's power was great. Then, Gudatsi and Matthew entered Wu Ming's black-purple portal side by side. He was followed by Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan. The last ones were Arash and Kota Saito. Then Master, I'll go first, meow, Azrael said and jumped into the portal. Then it's our turn next. Wu Ming looked at Bedivere and Jillian. Chapter 780. You go first, Bedivere. Wu Ming snapped his fingers and opened another portal. Then, Sir Villo, I'll wait for you first. Bedivere nodded to Wu Ming, waved his robe, and went into the portal that Wu Ming opened. Then I'll be the second, Master. Giliel smiled and flew into the second teleportation portal. Finally, Wu Ming looked at the last person besides himself, Xuanzang Sanzang. Master Sanzang, take care of yourself here. You guys need to take care of yourselves. I just need to stay here, and you guys are going into the lion's den. It really makes this poor monk feel guilty. Tang Sanzang looked embarrassed. No one is perfect, and the same is true for servants. I feel very lucky that Master Sanzang can pray for us, Wu Ming said. Well then, Wizard Sanzang, take care. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he went into the portal as well. However, the portal that Wu Ming entered seemed to be... Hey! You chose the wrong portal. However, the portal was still closed, leaving Tang Sanzang howling there alone. Forget it. Anyway, this portal's ability is his. He should come back if he notices that something is wrong. Tang Sanzang sighed. Walking to the window, Tang Sanzang looked at the blue sky, lowered his head and prayed. Ba. Indeed, Wu Ming entered the first portal last, which meant that the portal that Wu Ming entered was the Sun King's side. However, that was not because Wu Ming chose the wrong portal, but because Wu Ming had deliberately chosen it because Wu Ming had already started a war with the other side in the Holy City. Sky-wing species surrounded the gate of the Holy City, arranged in 3 rows in the sky, and the magic power in their hands was constantly surging. Wu Ming floated behind the 3 rows of sky-wing species, looking down with his hands crossed in front of his chest. Whoosh! The first row of sky-wing species launched a ball of magic power at the gate of the Holy City like a cannonball, causing a big explosion. Boom! Immediately afterward, the sky-wing species in the first row immediately floated up and retreated to the back of the 3rd row. They began to reorganize themselves and became the new 3rd row. As for the 2nd row, they took a step forward and replaced the 1st row as they launched their attacks. Because they were charging up while the original 1st row was attacking, the damage dealt by the new 1st row was particularly obvious. Boom! As for the new 1st row, after releasing their attacks, they floated up to the current 3rd row, which was behind the original 1st row, and began to repair themselves. The original 3rd row had now become the 1st row. Because they had begun accumulating power when the 1st row released their attacks, they were now able to directly launch their attacks. The power of their attacks was still not bad compared to the 1st row. Boom! Immediately after, this row retreated to the last row and began to reorganize. The original 1st row became the 1st row once again, and because they began to accumulate power when the 1st row launched their attacks, they could also directly release their attacks now. In this way, the 3 rows of sky-wing species repeatedly attacked the Holy City below without stopping. That's right. This was the simplest three-section formation. Through the alternation of the 3 rows, they could instantly release attacks that couldn't be released instantly without stopping. Moreover, it was a highly concentrated attack. However, because the ordinary Skywing species were Berserker, it could be said that they couldn't even use such an ordinary formation. All of this was actually under the command of Wuming. With the contract as a link, Wuming had no problem giving some tasks to the Skywing species as their master. Wuming was now rather helpless about the Skywing species becoming Berserkers. It was quite disadvantageous for a social creature to become Berserkers because the advantage of social creatures was cooperation. One couldn't expect a group of Berserkers to cooperate with each other. Fortunately, the Skywing species still obeyed their master's orders as servants, so Wuming had no problem commanding the Skywing species in battle. The 3-section formation kept firing, and with the Skywing species in the air, the people of the Holy City couldn't show their faces at all. This made things difficult for the gatekeeper, Gawain. Damn it! Is the enemy's magic infinite? Gawain, who was leading a group of solemn knights to hide behind the Holy City's gates, was depressed. Although Gawain's combat strength had increased 3-fold under the sun, he wouldn't foolishly charge into the sea of cannons and take the damage. What if he died? What should he do? However, it turned out that the enemy's magic wasn't infinite. The magic cannons outside stopped. It couldn't be helped. If this continued, the 3 rows of Skywing species would run out of magic power and leave. However, Wuming still had several thousand Skywing species behind him, so he wasn't afraid of the enemy at all. However, Wuming could tell from the Skywing species cannons that the Holy City wouldn't be blown up so easily. Pure magic cannons wouldn't work at all. Thus, after the 3 rows of Skywing species in front of Wuming stopped attacking, Wuming didn't continue sending the Skywing species behind him to attack. With a snap of his fingers, a dark purple portal opened, and the 3 rows of Skywing species in front of Wuming flew in an orderly fashion. The other side of the portal was inside Abinth's body. Although the Skywing species had descended as servants, and their magic power was exhausted or killed, it wouldn't affect their main body. Wuming still didn't want anything to happen to them. If he had the ability to protect his subordinates, why wouldn't he do it? Wuming had a wicked taste, but it was also divided into different aspects. The 3 rows of Skywing species all entered the portal, and suddenly, a portal appeared beside Wuming. Bedivere walked out with an expression that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is freezing." Then he began to fall. This gave Bedivere a fright. Why was the exit in the air? Wuming immediately used his mind power to pick up the falling Bedivere. Sir Villo. This is... Bedivere was a little confused. Why was he, who had left first, slower than Wuming? And why was it in the air? However, before Wuming could answer, there was movement from the portal again. Oh! The second person to come out of the portal was Gopril. Is everyone here? Has it already started? Looking at the many sisters behind her, Gopril was a little confused. But because she could fly, Gopril didn't fall from the sky like Bedivere. Master, aren't you behind me? Gopril had the same question. Seeing that there was no movement from the Holy City, Wuming looked at Bedivere and Gopril. Don't worry, one question at a time. Then Gopril beat him to it. Me first, me first. Question, why are there 2 masters? Chapter 781. Because the one talking to you in West Village just now was my clone, Wuming answered truthfully. Clone? Both Jillian and Bedivere were taken aback, and then they were shocked. As expected of Lord Villo. I didn't realize that it was a clone at all. That clone gave me the feeling that it was Lord Villo's main body. Bedivere had a "you're amazing" expression. It not only highlighted Wuming's strength, but it also didn't look exaggerated. It was just right. It was nothing to have an outstanding expression. Wuming had seen many people like this, but those guys were all acting. As for Bedivere, Wuming knew very well that this guy's expression was his true expression. This made Wuming feel rather uncomfortable. That's one of the god's authority I obtained in the other world. A perfect clone. Except for the extremely special ability that can't be replicated, the clone is exactly the same as the main body. This authority was naturally Wuming's 12 clones dependent incarnation. However, the dependent incarnation had already been used by Wuming when he summoned the Skywing species, so why could he continue to use it? This was thanks to the Dragon Seed incarnation. The Dragon Seed incarnation mainly gave Wuming the ability to dragonize, but Wuming was a dragon himself, so this ability was slightly useless. However, there were no useless abilities, only poor users. Wuming had long discovered that the Dragon Seed incarnation could give the user an extremely strong physique. Whether it was physical fitness or magic power, they were all unprecedentedly improved. It was especially effective when combined with Giant Incarnation, Phoenix Incarnation, and other avatars. Therefore, Wuming wondered if the Dragon Seed incarnation could be used to strengthen other avatars. After Wuming experimented, he found that this idea could be done. Because of Tristan's appearance in West Village, Wuming already had doubts about Ramses II. After sending Tristan off, Wuming was not in a hurry to go back. Instead, he studied how to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation to other incarnations to see what effect it would have. Wuming decided to strengthen the Dragon Seed incarnation on his dependent incarnation, which allowed Wuming's dependent incarnation to revive. Because it was a degraded version of the avatar ability, each avatar could not use it again after using it once. This was the reason why the dependent avatars could not use it again. However, the unexpected surprise of the Dragon Seed incarnation had resurrected the dependent incarnation. Although the Dragon Seed incarnation could not be used, it was not a big deal. Although it was cruel to say that, the Dragon Seed was not very useful to Wuming. After that, Wuming's doppelganger returned to West Village and discussed with Gudatzi and the others. As for Wuming himself, he directly went to Holy City and launched an attack on it. In any case, no matter how the doppelganger was grouped with Gudatzi, Wuming would definitely be among the people who came to Holy City. Therefore, Wuming came ahead of time. Moreover, Wuming and the doppelganger were still connected. Although they could not share images, they could at least exchange information. In addition, the doppelganger and the main body were the same person. Wuming was not worried that the doppelganger would mess things up. I see. That's why I felt that the doppelganger master was a little illusory. Gopril completely understood what was going on. Instead, it was Silent Wonder who looked at Gopril in surprise. Even his own mother would not be able to tell, yet Gopril, a mere Skywing species, was actually able to see the clues? Could it be that the Vitality Incarnation ability in Gopril's body made Gopril and Wuming's dependent incarnation have a little mutual encouragement? Wuming felt that this should be the case. Sir Villo, have you already started a war with Holy City? Although Bedivere didn't see the 3 rows of Skywings, the careful Bedivere saw that the main gate of the Holy City, the surrounding walls, and the ground were all slightly damaged. Even the radiance of the Holy City had dimmed a little. I have the advantage in numbers. Why would I fight Gawain alone? Wuming pointed at the thousands of Skywings behind him and smiled. Although there were not tens of thousands of them, they still numbered in the thousands. Bedivere was a little helpless. He did not expect Sir Villo to still have such a personality. All right, it's just a joke. Wuming shook his head. I was actually testing the strength of Holy City, and it was just as I expected. Holy City is exactly the same as Camello City. Its walls are also as thick as Camello City. Wuming spread his hands. Wuming thought of Matthew's noble phantasm, which was as indestructible as the walls of Holy City in front of him. In this case, there's really no other good way except to start from the gates. As a Knight of the Round Table, Bedivere naturally understood the power of his own city walls. Wuming also tried an air raid, but it did not succeed. Just like what he saw a few days ago, a layer of light covered the sky above Holy City. It was the light film emitted by the Holy Spear, which seemed to be specially designed to defend against aerial units. The Skywings could not enter at all. In that case, this gate of Good City will be broken by my noble phantasm. As Wuming spoke, he took out the Meteor Silver from the golden ripples in the void. Meteor Silver Splendor, X Silver Meteor. Level. EX Type. Evil Noble Phantasm Distance. Maximum Catch. This was a treasure created by the planet Suppression. The Holy Star Sword, which had truly been released from its restrictions, had the effect of determining the target as evil. As long as it had the definition of the user's enemy, or someone who must be defeated, it would be marked with the evil attribute by the Holy Sword. The target of the determination was both a person and an object. Even concepts such as space and time could be included in the determination. Ever since the meteor silver had been consecrated by the suppression. Cough cough. After the transformation, it had gained this powerful noble phantasm. It was with this noble phantasm that the fledgling Wu-Ming successfully defeated the other party in the battle with the Indian demigod Karna. However, it was only a narrow victory. Karna was mainly completely shrouded in the aftermath that could not spread out. To put it simply, he was affected by the aftermath. Karna, who had unleashed his most powerful attack, had lost his invincible armor, and had been affected by the aftershock of the collision between his most powerful attack and Silent's most powerful attack. How could he not be forced out of the arena? And Wu-Ming still had armor and recovery potions at that time, so naturally, he could survive more than Karna. Back to the main point, the main effect of Wu-Ming's noble phantasm was to determine the target of the attack as evil, and then he would launch the attack. At that time, Wu-Ming, who was fighting Karna, had used this noble phantasm more like a light cannon than an evil judgment. That was why he had won by a narrow margin. However, Wu-Ming was no longer immature now. He could fully unleash the true power of this sword. Chapter 782. At this moment, Wu-Ming suddenly received news that his clone and Gudatsi had gone to an incredible place. Is it because of the great shrine's barrier that caused the teleportation to deviate? Wu-Ming muttered to himself in an extremely soft voice. This was Wu-Ming's oversight. When Wu-Ming had gone to find Ramses II, Ramses II's great shrine had blocked Wu-Ming's teleportation gate. Although it was indoors, it was very likely that Ramses II had spread the barrier to the entire great shrine complex, or even the surroundings of the complex. Wu-Ming was not surprised. After all, the other party was a top-tier servant. Thus, the teleportation deviation could be said to have been caused by Wu-Ming's negligence. However, with my clone around, there shouldn't be any problems. Although after entering the Atlas courtyard, the connection between the original body and the avatar had weakened a lot. Even so, Wu-Ming didn't think that anything would happen to Gudatsi and the others. When his clone had held Gudatsi's hand to pray to Gudatsi, he had attached a command seal to the back of Gudatsi's hand. That command seal could be considered the key to opening Wu-Ming's prized artifact. The clone finally entered the teleportation gate that Gudatsi and the others had used. The moment he entered, the clone changed the destination of the teleportation gate to his prized artifact, Dragonist. When an accident happened, the clone could use that switch to save the situation. Besides, Gudatsi had so many servants. While he did not dare to say that she would be able to take care of everything on her own, it would be a groundless worry if something happened. Thus, Wu-Ming only needed to take care of the matter at hand. Then I'll begin. After Wu-Ming said that, the Sky Wings seemed to have received some sort of order and collectively retreated. Only Gopril and Bedivere, who was being controlled by Wu-Ming's mental power, remained by Wu-Ming's side. Closing his eyes, Wu-Ming held the hilt of meteor silver with both hands and held it upright in front of his chest as he began to activate his prized artifact. The stars hidden in the world. Wu-Ming's ethereal voice came out of his mouth. Next, Meteor Silver's blade began to emit a silver-white light that illuminated everything around it. Holy sword to annihilate all evil. Cracks appeared on the silver-white blade of the silver meteor sword, and an even purer golden light burst out from the cracks. Don't cover your light. When Wu-Ming finished chanting this sentence, the entire blade of meteor silver instantly shattered with a crack. The golden sword of light that did not have a physical body was born from the destruction. Like a sprout that was about to grow into a towering tree, it constantly floated and grew. The completely shattered blade of meteor silver turned into silver fragments that adhered to the golden sword of light and extended along with it. Inside the holy city's gates, Gawain gulped and immediately ordered the Knights of Solemnity to retreat. He knew that this was not something that they, or even the holy city's gates, could stop. Shine! Finally, like the straw that broke the camel's back, the golden sword of light burst forth once more, a scorching and dazzling radiance illuminating the earth. Gopril and Bedivere, who were next to Wu-Ming, could not help but use their hands to cover their eyes. The radiance of meteor silver was simply too dazzling. Silver meteor. Meteor silver splendor. With the final prized artifact, true name liberation, Wu-Ming swung it down. Whoosh! Like a surging river, the golden light swept toward the holy city's gates like a flood and slammed into them. Boom! the sky wings all closed their eyes and used their wings to cover themselves. Bedivere and Gopril could not help but retreat because of the pressure generated by this attack. Servillo. Bedivere forced his eyes open and looked at Wu Ming in front of him. Bedivere had never known how powerful Wu Ming was. This power can definitely save my king. Bedivere prayed, but in the end, because the radiance was too dazzling, Bedivere still closed his eyes. The radiance lasted for a few moments before quickly disappearing. The holy city's gates had already been opened. There was no sign of damage. It was as if the holy city's gates had never been there in the first place. They had completely disappeared. The gates that were defined as evil had been completely removed by the holy sword of justice. Wu Ming landed on the ground, and Bedivere and Gopril followed him down. After landing on the ground, Bedivere looked through the gates and saw the holy city's interior. The trees were neatly trimmed, and it did not reduce its beauty. The ground was all stone, without any trace of dust. Moreover, the roads were very neatly planned, and even the buildings were bright white, as if they were made of marble. Bedivere could even vaguely see a fountain through the gates. Everything was so beautiful that it was practically an ideal city. Although it was very much like Camelot, it was even more beautiful than Camelot. Bedivere had already begun to understand why people who were not pure could not enter. Letting evil people step into such a beautiful city was simply a stain on it. Of course, it might be better if one ignored the large number of solemn knights and Gawain who had begun to urgently assemble. "Are you ready, Bedivere?" Wu Ming asked Bedivere without turning his head as he looked at the solemn knights walking out of the gates. There was no doubt that Wu Ming was asking Bedivere if he was ready to rush into the holy city and face the Lion King. "Yes. Always ready, Servillo." Bedivere's eyes became firm as he answered Wu Ming with a firm tone. "Then let's begin, everyone." At Wu Ming's command, the sky wing species curled into a ball in the sky instantly spread their wings and swooped down collectively, beginning the battle with the solemn knights. On the other side, at Gudatsi's place, time jumped forward. A black-purple ripple appeared somewhere in the desert, and then a girl with orange hair and a girl with a shield appeared from it. These two were naturally Gudatsi and Matthew. Desert. Gudatsi was stunned. Although the Sun King was indeed in the desert, it was impossible for there to be any buildings around. Servillo said that he would teleport us to the vicinity of the Sun King's great temple, but I can't see any temples around. Matthew was also quite helpless. Could it be that we came to the wrong place? Before Gudatsi and Matthew could discuss what was going on, there was movement in the portal again. The big sister with the face of Mona Lisa appeared. Did we come to the wrong place? Da Vinci noticed the surroundings as soon as he arrived. "Doctor, are you there?" Gudatsi asked her bracelet. However, no one responded to Gudatsi. "It seems that the desert barrier should have cut off Chaldea's communication again," Matthew said. Although they were prepared for not being able to contact Chaldea, Gudatsi and the others still hoped to be able to contact him. "What should we do now?" Chapter 783. The portal should be two-way. "Senior, let's hurry back through the portal," Matthew suggested. However, the sound of Hassan and Arash landing on the ground gave Matthew a negative answer. After everyone arrived, the teleportation portal closed instantly. This made Matthew, who proposed the idea of returning now, quite embarrassed, and it also made Hassan and Arash quite embarrassed. They all heard what Matthew said, but since things had come to this point, they could only bite the bullet. Hassan, who jumped out of the portal, landed on one knee. Maintaining the posture of kneeling on one knee, cursed wrist Hassan, like Gudatsi and Matthew, was full of doubts about the scene in front of him. Did we come to the wrong place? Although he did hear Matthew's words, cursed wrist Hassan did not know why Matthew wanted to go back through the portal. But now, cursed wrist Hassan almost understood. We should have come to the wrong place. 100 Faces Hassan stood up, took 2 steps, and looked around. Quiet Hassan nodded slightly as if he knew her name. As the only archer, Arash made full use of the function of her telescope. The surrounding is a flat desert, there are no sand dunes, and there are no traces of any buildings, Arash said. "What do we do now?" Arash looked at Gudatsi. Without Wu Ming, Gudatsi, as the master, was their leader. "Anyway, the portal has been closed. Let's explore the surroundings and see which direction is the Sun King's territory. Immediately afterward, Gudatzi looked at Da Vinci. Only Da Vinci was a caster, and this time, they had to rely on caster. Ah, it's useless to look at me. I have no problem figuring out the direction in the desert, but if you want to ask me, where are we now, it's really difficult. Sure enough, even the genius Da Vinci can't do anything about this. Matthew was a little disappointed. Mr. Hassan, can you tell where we are? Gudatzi looked at Cursed Wrist Hassan, as well as his companions, 100 Faces Hassan and Tranquil Hassan. Although our Hassan is not afraid of the sandstorm in the desert, if we didn't come here ourselves, we wouldn't know where we are in the desert now. Cursed Wrist Hassan shook his head and gave Gudatzi a disappointed answer. Then what should we do? Gudatzi had a weird done-for look on her face. I've discovered something interesting. Da Vinci suddenly spoke. Although Da Vinci was unable to complete Gudatzi's request, Da Vinci was still capable of simply exploring the surroundings. What did you discover, Da Vinci's lover? Gudatzi quickly walked up to Da Vinci. There's a barrier in front of us. But, Da Vinci's lover, our main task now is to crusade against the Sun King. How can finding a barrier help us at this time? Matthew was puzzled. Although that's true, Matthew, if there's a building with a barrier in the desert, if it doesn't belong to the Sun King, then there must be a big secret. After all, the Sun King had moved all the buildings together to form his temple complex. Now that we have no clue, there's no harm in taking a look. Maybe we can find out where we are now. With that, Da Vinci took the lead and walked over. Hey, wait for us, Da Vinci's lover. Gudatzi pulled Matthew and quickly caught up. Meanwhile, the three Hassans and Arash looked at each other. What should we do? Cursed Wrist Hassan asked quietly. Follow me. 100 Faces Hassan finished speaking, and with a handsome swing, he followed Gudatzi. Quiet Wrist Hassan followed closely behind 100 Faces Hassan. Indeed, as Ms. Da Vinci said, we can only take one step at a time. Arash smiled and said something to Cursed Wrist Hassan, then quickly followed. I didn't say I wouldn't follow, I just wanted to ask. Scratching his head, Cursed Wrist Hassan, who was left alone, also followed. Wu Ming's clone in the Dragon Lair space saw the situation outside through the special command seal on the back of Gudatzi's hand. The clone was also very sorry about the unexpected teleportation deviation. However, he was quite interested in the barrier and buried building that Da Vinci mentioned. If it's not Ramses II's building, what could it be? The clone pondered. Everything is normal on the main body side, and I don't have to rush to attack Ramses II. Let's see what Tachika and the others can find. There was something the clone did not say. He had a hunch that the Sun King was the final enemy. On the Holy City's side, the Sky Wings and the Solemn Knights were fighting. As soon as they came, the Sky Wings condensed energy weapons and began a melee battle with the Solemn Knights. It could not be helped. Although using magic for long-range bombardment was also very good, the Sky Wings still liked to fight in melee. Even if the Sky Wings had lost their minds, they could still beat the Solemn Knights into retreat. It should not be forgotten that the Sky Wings appeared in the world as servants. Even Berserker was a servant, and it was not an existence that the Solemn Knights could fight against. The Solemn Knights generally relied on numbers to swarm the servants, but this time, their trick was not effective. Although they couldn't count, maybe the number of enemy servants was more than the number of Solemn Knights. However, because the Sky Wings were all melee fighters, the Solemn Knights could rely on numbers to replace the other party. However, in the current situation, 10 Solemn Knights for one Sky Wing was quite extravagant and basically impossible. Basically, it would take 100 Solemn Knights to replace one Sky Wing. It was a good thing that the Sky Wings were servants, or else Wu Ming would not have let them fight like this. Let alone 100 Solemn Knights, even if there were thousands or tens of thousands of them to replace one Sky Wing, Wu Ming would still feel the pinch. Putting aside the fact that the Sky Wings were his subordinates, they were still young girls. How could they compare to these smelly old men? Putting aside the joke, even if it was 100 Solemn Knights for one Sky Wing, the defeat of the Solemn Knights was clearly visible. If not for the fact that there was no order from above, Gawain might have already ordered the Solemn Knights to retreat. That was because if this continued, the Solemn Knights of the Holy City would all be dead. However, even if they were all dead, they could not retreat. When Wu Ming had used the noble artifact to blow up the gate, he had ordered the solemn knights to retreat to avoid unnecessary casualties. Now, however, they had to defend the main gate. For the king. With that thought in mind, Gawain swung his sword and killed a skywing that was attacking him. The skywing turned into magic power and disappeared from Gawain's side. Hold on. The holy city must be defended. Chapter 784. Wu Ming and Bedivere stood at the back of the fighting army and watched. Gilliel could no longer bear the excitement and had run to the battlefield to fight. The reason Wu Ming did not go up to fight was very simple. His ultimate goal was never to fight, but to charge into the holy city. There was simply no point in fighting. Fighting was a reward for the Skywing breeds, so Wu Ming gave this reward to the Skywing breeds who enjoyed fighting. Wu Ming glanced at the eager Bedivere and said, "What? What's wrong, Bedivere? Do you want to fight too?" "No, Sir Villo. I just feel that we shouldn't be idling here." Bedivere silently shook his head. Bedivere was a knight of noble character, after all. Seeing his own people charge into the fray while he enjoyed the safety in the rear was something he could not bear. "You don't need to think too much, Bedivere. The Skywing breeds are god-killing weapons. Fighting is what they like to do." Wu Ming then pointed at the Skywing breeds closest to Bedivere and said, "Look." Bedivere looked over and saw that the Skywing breeds in the midst of fighting was smiling. Not only that, but the Skywing breeds around her were also smiling. It was clearly a berserker, but they were smiling. It was impossible to say that they were not happy, and this was a joy that came from their very bones. That's why having the Skywings fight is actually a reward for them. Besides, as Wu Ming said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Gawain, who was constantly killing the Skywing breeds. "We still have an even more important mission." The Skywing breeds were truly very powerful, and the Solemn Knights could only kill 1 out of 100 of them, but that was only for the Solemn Knights. To Gawain, who had the Knightless blessing, the Skywing breeds that enjoyed fighting were not frightening. No matter how powerful a beast was, it was still a beast. Hunters always had a way to deal with beasts. Just like now. The Skywing breeds attacking Gawain swung their scythes at him, but Gawain dodged to the side. Due to inertia, the Skywing scythe landed heavily on the ground. But because of this momentary inertia, Gawain's solar holy sword cut off the Skywing's head. The headless Skywing seed shook twice, turned into pure magic power, and disappeared. The lack of rationality was the greatest weakness of the Skywing species, while having rationality was Gawain's greatest advantage. Gawain was already annoyed by the constant bombardment from the Skywing lifeforms. Now that the Skywing lifeforms had stopped their bombardment and switched to close combat, Gawain was naturally happy to oblige. Although the Solemn Knight was retreating, it was still better than not daring to go out and fight with the enemy. Previously, he would have died in vain if he went out. Now, at least he could take a few enemies with him. Of course, even if they wanted to defend, there was no way to do so. The holy city's gate was gone, and there was no way to defend. After Gawain killed quite a few Skywing species, the surrounding Skywing species realized the threat he posed. The Skywing species had indeed gone berserk due to their berserker class, but their instincts were still there. Just as the instincts of wild beasts told them that beast hunters were dangerous, the instincts of the Skywing species told them that this golden-haired monkey wielding a white longsword and wearing white armor was very dangerous. Several Skywing species swarmed forward, attempting to tear apart this threatening monkey from all directions. However, it was clear that this golden-haired monkey was not afraid of attacks coming from all directions. In fact, it was perfect for dealing with enemies coming from all directions. Excalibur Gallatin. Gawain instantly released the solar holy sword, which turned into a scorching sun and sent the Skywing species that got close to Gawain flying. Because they were deep in the battlefield and the Solemn Knight was still around, Gawain's Noble Phantasm did not do much, only using the lowest level of Noble Phantasm release. Thus, the Skywing species that were attacking Gawain were sent flying instead of being vaporized by the heat. However, even the lowest level of Noble Phantasm release was still quite scorching for the Skywing species that were close to Gawain. These Skywing species that were sent flying turned into magic particles in the next second and left the battlefield. Gawain waved his solar holy sword and was quite satisfied. At this rate, the main gate won't fail. However, reality told Gawain that he could not casually raise flags. X silver. The half-released noble phantasm instantly slashed at Gawain. As expected of Gawain, he immediately placed the solar holy sword in front of him. Clang! The dazzling white meteor silver clashed with Gawain's solar holy sword, producing an ear-piercing sound of metal clashing. Because meteor silver was in a half-released state, Gawain could not help but half-kneel after receiving the attack. Bang! This was the sound of Gawain's knee hitting the ground. Gawain stood up and spread out meteor silver, panting as he looked ahead. Sir Villo, since when have you become a sneak attacker? I don't want to hear you say that, Gawain. Wu Ming waved his sword and removed the meteor silver's noble phantasm from its half-released state. This is a battlefield. Do you think I'll yell, "I'm going to attack you," before attacking you? Don't make me laugh. However, Wu Ming still laughed, but it was a mocking laugh. Gawain naturally understood what Wu Ming meant. Or rather, how could he not understand? There was no such thing as a sneak attack on a battlefield where danger lurked everywhere. From the moment you stepped into the battlefield, it meant that you agreed to be attacked at any time and place. That's my fault. However, Gawain did not have the slightest fault. Instead, he assumed an attacking stance. It couldn't be helped. The Holy City had already given the order that Wu Ming was an enemy. As a knight who completely obeyed the king, Wu Ming was Gawain's enemy. You go in first, Wu Ming suddenly said. Of course, this was not said to Gawain, but to Bedivere, who was walking behind Wu Ming. Sir Bedivere? Gawain was stunned. But he soon understood. Back then, Chaldea's master claimed to be the messenger of this new force, and Bedivere had escaped with Chaldea's people. Therefore, Bedivere was naturally one of them. It was not strange that he would appear at this juncture. The Holy City's gate is open. You go in first, I'll be right behind you, Wu Ming repeated. Yes, Sir Villo. Bedivere obeyed Wu Ming's words and immediately ran towards the Holy City's gate from the other side. Wait! Gawain would not let Bedivere enter even if it was him. However, Wu Ming directly rushed forward and swung meteor silver down heavily again. Bang! Another clash of swords. Give up, Gawain. With me here, you won't be able to stop Bedivere. Pressing down on Gawain with his sword, Wu Ming said while looking into Gawain's eyes at such a close distance. Gawain's frown deepened. Chapter 785. As a comrade who had served King Arthur for many years, Gawain understood Wu Ming very well, just as Wu Ming understood Gawain very well. Similarly, Gawain also understood how terrifying Wu Ming was. He had a mysterious background, an ageless face, and mysterious runic magic. Even in the Knights of the Round Table, Wu Ming's martial prowess was one of the best. Unlike Gawain's wide-open swordsmanship, Wu Ming's swordsmanship was both wide-open and agile. This was all thanks to the teachings of Wu Ming's master and sister, Skaha. Wu Ming and Gawain exchanged blows. Sometimes, their sacred swords would clash, creating sparks. Sometimes they would dodge, creating dangerous situations. Sometimes, they would attack and defend quickly, their swords dancing in the air. In the end, they would occasionally kill a few Knights of Solemnity and Skywings. Of course, it was Wu Ming who killed the Knights of Solemnity and Gawain who killed the Skywings. Although it was only a few exchanges, if an expert was present, they would realize that Wu Ming and Gawain had engaged in an extremely thrilling exchange of blows. However, because Wu Ming was not pursuing the pinnacle of martial arts, Wu Ming's martial prowess had not yet reached the level of being invincible. Furthermore, Gawain's saint's number had tripled his strength, so Wu Ming had not immediately taken him down. However, Gawain could not do anything to Wu Ming. As expected, you haven't changed, Gawain. Wu Ming and Gawain stood a few meters apart, staring at each other. Wu Ming and Gawain had exchanged a few blows, undoubtedly to test Gawain's ability. Gawain was exactly as Wu Ming had expected him to be. After all, I'm already dead. How can I grow? Gawain would not ignore Wu Ming just because he was an enemy. But even so, Sir Villo, you can't take me down immediately. With the protection of Knightless, Gawain was even confident that he wouldn't lose to Wu Ming. In this way, Bedivere, who had barged into the Holy City but didn't receive any reinforcements, was no longer a concern. After all, Agwawan was still in the Holy City. So while you stopped growing, I didn't stop growing at all. It was also because of this that Wu Ming didn't do much research on martial arts. Unlike Luo Hao in the God Slayer world, who had studied martial arts to the extreme and reached the pinnacle of martial arts, Wu Ming was neither interested nor necessary. After all, Wu Ming only needed the means to defeat the enemy. Wu Ming stabbed the meteor silver into the ground and held the sword hilt with one hand. He then closed his eyes and placed his other hand on his heart as he began to chant. I am the strongest, and I hold victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a demon, he's someone who will defeat all his enemies. Not good? Before Wu Ming finished chanting, Gawain sensed danger. He absolutely could not allow the other party to finish reading this inexplicable sentence. That was what Gawain thought. Gawain stomped on the ground and rushed toward Wu Ming with the solar holy sword that was beginning to heat up. However, Gawain's speed was not as fast as Wu Ming's mouth. I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. The moment he finished chanting, Wu Ming opened his eyes. His originally red eyes had now turned golden, and a golden mist began to appear around Wu Ming's body. Excalibur Gallatin. Gawain instantly released his noble phantasm and attempted to use it to attack Wu Ming. However, a large golden hand grabbed Gawain's body instantly. The golden mist around Wu Ming began to spread and solidify, forming a golden giant with only the upper half of his body. The hand that grabbed Gawain was none other than the giant's hand. Gawain's noble phantasm exploded in the giant's palm, and the flames of the sun seeped out from the gaps between the giant's fists like fireworks. Immediately after, the giant seemed to stand up, its two legs stepping out of the ground and firmly landing on the ground. Boom! Boom! The giant landed with two loud thuds, causing the Sky Wings and the Knights of Solemnity to stop in their tracks. That's... How could there be an enemy like that? It was a good thing that the Sky Wings had gone berserk and could not speak, or else they would have been very excited. Everyone stopped what they were doing. This was not an act but a subconscious reaction. Everyone could sense the extreme danger of the golden giant, and they all stopped what they were doing. They all watched helplessly as the golden giant grabbed the sun, that was still spewing flames. Then, the giant raised Gawain up high and slammed him down on the ground. The moment he hit the ground, the giant opened its palm and pressed Gawain firmly into the ground. Boom! Whoosh! A deafening sound created a visible shockwave that swept through the entire battlefield with the golden giant at its center. Eya! Wah! The Knights of Solemnity and the Sky Wings were all sent flying. Wu Ming was at the golden giant's heart, looking down at Gawain, who was pressed down by the giant's palm, without the slightest bit of surprise. This was why he did not pursue martial arts to the extreme. He had a way to defeat his enemy. What is this? Gawain clenched his teeth and asked Wu Ming in a rather sorry state. Killed the authority of a god. Personally, I think it's not bad, Wu Ming casually described. Gawain could only bitterly smile. It was indeed not bad. Gawain was unable to resist at all. Gawain's flames could indeed cause damage to the golden giant, but they were not very effective. Furthermore, the golden giant was formed from dense air, and it would immediately replenish itself after being burned. Thus, Gawain had no way of dealing with the giant. Furthermore, the giant's main ability was immense strength, so Gawain was completely unable to get up while being pressed down by the golden giant. Even the solar holy sword had fallen out of his hand and was pressed to the side. I've lost, Lord Villo, Gawain said indifferently as if he had given up. It's good that you understand. After all, he did not have to kill him. If possible, Wu Ming wished to spare Gawain's life. However, I swore an oath to my king that I would defend the city gate until the very end. However, Wu Ming really wanted to retort, your city gate was destroyed by me a long time ago. Hold on, are you thinking of? Wu Ming suddenly realized a problem. Gawain's words sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of his heart before he died, as if he wanted to drag his enemy down with him. That's right, Lord Villo. I'm going to self-destruct. Gawain bared his white teeth, looking very proud. Then, the solar holy sword in Gawain's body began to emit a blazing light. Boom! Chapter 786. On Gudazi's side, everyone followed Da Vinci to, or accidentally fell into a mysterious clubhouse. This clubhouse, in Da Vinci's view, was simply magic workshop. Da Vinci looked at the entrance in front of him and made such a judgment. What? Da Vinci, Is this the magic workshop? However, for such a large-scale workshop, there should be records of it in history. Da Vinci fell silent, because she couldn't find the information of this magic workshop from her memory. This is Atlas Courtyard. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the shadows. Who is it? Cursed Wrist Hassan, 100 Faces Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan immediately took out their daggers, full of vigilance. Until the other party made a sound, Hassan didn't find a person in the shadows, which undoubtedly made Hassan lose face. But at the same time, the other party also made Hassan feel danger. Hassan alone couldn't discover this. This unknown servant was dangerous enough. Senpai. Matthew also immediately summoned a shield and stood in front of Godotzi. The man who made a sound in the shadows gave everyone the feeling that he was a servant after he leaked his aura. Confirmed that the other party is a servant, master. Please be careful. Matthew reported to Godotzi. Arash, on the other hand, was not vigilant because of this, or Arash felt that the other party was not a bad person. Da Vinci, we. Godotzi just wanted to discuss with Da Vinci, but Da Vinci suddenly shouted as if he was possessed. Atlas Courtyard? Da Vinci took 2 steps forward and looked at the shadows. Is this really Atlas Courtyard? What's wrong with Da Vinci? Where is Atlas Courtyard? Godotzi knew nothing about it, so she looked at Matthew, who had some understanding of the magic world. Senior, I don't know the details. I only know the name Atlas Academy. It's said to be one of the 3 major departments of the Magic Association, but it doesn't have any contact with outsiders. Matthew returned to Godotzi based on his own understanding. Although it's one of the departments of the Magic Association, it's the same as the Imitation Scarlet Sea. It's a secret society that doesn't communicate with outsiders, Da Vinci explained. He's also an expert in alchemy. It's said that the 7 alchemy tools sealed in Atlas Academy can destroy the world 7 times, the man in the shadow explained. Destroy the world 7 times. This gave Godotzi a fright. Ignoring Godotzi's shock for the time being, Da Vinci revealed another secret. It said that the headquarters of the Academy of Atlas is located in Egypt's Atlas Mountains. It seems that it's true. After all, this is the territory of Ramses II, which is Egypt, so it's not surprising that Atlas Academy exists here, the man in the shadow said and walked out of the shadow. He was wearing a suit like an English gentleman, holding a decorative cane in one hand, and a rather old pipe in the other hand, and a detective's face. Nice to meet you, everyone from Chaldea, Hassan, and the great hero of West Asia, Mr. Arash. The man with the pipe said everyone's identity as soon as he opened his mouth. This caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Although the other party didn't completely say the name of Godotzi, since he could say the name of Chaldea, then he should know the name. The other party should say it for brevity. I'm sorry for forgetting to introduce myself. The man with the pipe showed a rather sorry smile and then began to introduce himself. I am Sherlock Holmes, a caster servant. Nice to meet you, the last master of Chaldea, Rika Fujimaru. This time, the other party said the name of Godotzi, but that was not the point. The point was the other party's real name, which shocked Godotzi and the others. Sherlock Holmes. At the gate of the Holy City. The big explosion caused by Gawain's self-explosion swept almost half of the battlefield. It could only be said that he deserved to be called the Sun Knight. His self-explosion was like a burning sun. It completely turned into a red fireball burning on the flat ground in front of the Holy City. However, this sun explosion only lasted for a short while, and soon the fireball disappeared, and the explosion stopped. However, the entire battlefield was destroyed. Because the Holy City was protected by the city walls, other than the street without the city gate that had turned black and melted, the walls of the Holy City were just like bricks that had been severely burned by the flames. There was basically no major problem. On the flat ground in front of the Holy City, there were no jagged holes, only a huge semicircular pit, which was mainly caused by the fireball. The huge pit was filled with magma, and the high temperature had caused the ground to melt. Whether it was soil, rocks, minerals, or anything else, they had all melted together to form this magma. It was also because of the explosion of the sun that the Knights of Solemnity were basically all dead, and only a few Knights of Solemnity who were far away from the explosion were still alive. In other words, their bodies were still there, but they had already lost their vitality inside their armor. The moisture in their bodies had been completely dried up, which was the fate of the Knights of Solemnity at the very edge. Compared to the Knights of Solemnity, the Sky Wings were both better and worse. Most of the Sky Wings, like most of the Knights of Solemnity, were instantly melted by the explosion of the sun and left the battlefield. However, because they were servants, the Sky Wings at the very edge were not as dried up as the Knights of Solemnity. Instead, they stubbornly survived. However, they were basically injured to the point where they couldn't continue fighting. Wu Ming had been at the very center of the explosion and had indeed disappeared. In the center of the huge pit, in the slowly condensing magma, a golden hand suddenly extended out of the magma. Immediately after, a golden giant crawled out of the magma as if it had crawled out of a quagmire, but only half of its body was visible. Then, the golden giant's head evaporated like gas, and a figure flew out. This figure was none other than Wu Ming. Why do all of them like to self-destruct? Wu Ming was particularly perplexed by this point. To be honest, Wu Ming had encountered many enemies who liked to self-destruct, such as Shitendaji of the Winterwood Peculiarity, Ibaraki Boy of the American Peculiarity, and Mordred at the entrance of Higashi Village. But to be honest, self-destructing isn't a bad method. Wu Ming chuckled. This was none other than Lord Hyun-ryong, who had used a different kind of self-destruct on Gorgon back at the Mesopotamia Singularity. However, thanks to Gawain, another one of my clones has lost its effectiveness. Chapter 787. Wu Ming turned to look at the headless golden giant in the lava. After the golden giant spat out Wu Ming, its body began to turn into golden particles and gradually dissipate. Wu Ming, who was completely protected by the giant, was unscathed, but his avatar had been rendered useless. However, it was not as if there was no good news. The solemn knights of the Holy City had basically been wiped out, and while the Sky Wings had also suffered heavy casualties, they had only lost their avatars. Their main bodies were completely unharmed. Meanwhile, Wu Ming had used an avatar to exchange for Gawain, the gatekeeping general. Thus, overall, it was not a loss, and from the overall situation, the Holy City did not have many servants left. Meanwhile, on Wu Ming's side, putting aside the fact that the Sky Wing army had suffered heavy casualties from Gawain's self-destruction, Gopral had yet to leave. With that thought in mind, Wu Ming began to search for Gopril's figure. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. What was that fireball? It came out of nowhere. Gopril's calves and feet were connected to her thighs as she sat on the ground in a rather sorry state, shaking her head that had been blasted by the explosion. Don't look at how Gopril's body was covered in dust and looked like she had been roasted into charcoal. However, Gopril was completely fine. No, to be more precise, she had completely recovered from her injuries. With the support of the Vitality Avatar, no matter how severe her injuries were, as long as Gopril had not been completely reduced to ashes, she would be able to fully recover in no time. When Gawain self-destructed, while Gopril was not in the center, she was still within the range of the explosion, so she had suffered quite a bit of burn damage. However, in that moment of chaos, Gopril's injuries had completely healed by relying on the power of the Vitality Avatar. After coming back to her senses, Gopril looked at her body and saw that she had no other injuries aside from a little black. She immediately began to laugh. Speaking of which, Master's power is really useful. Hee hee. Bang. However, Wu Ming gave her another blow to the head. Ouch, Giliel cried out in pain as she clutched her head with tears in her eyes. What are you laughing at? Clean yourself up and get ready to enter the Holy City with me. I know, Master. Giliel puffed up her cheeks and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Although he was dissatisfied, he had to endure it. While Gopril was cleaning herself up with magic, Wu Ming collected the surviving Skywing species. Even though Gawain's self-explosion had forced quite a few people out, there were still close to 1,000 survivors. However, due to their injuries, these Skywing species were no longer fit to continue fighting. You guys go back and rest. With that, Wu Ming gave the order for the gathered Skywings to return. Even if it was a servant, its main body would be fine even if it died here. Wu Ming did not wish to treat the Skywing species as a lifeless consumable. Even after transforming into Berserker, the Skywings still felt like they were dreaming. Even if it was a dream, Wu Ming hoped that they would not have a terrible dream this time. Opening the portal, the Skywings obeyed the orders of their master, Wu Ming, and returned to Abenth. As such, only Wu Ming and Giliel were left here. Giliel, who had finished cleaning herself up, came to Wu Ming's side.
Master, I'm ready.
The energetic Giliel was ready to go. Wu Ming nodded and looked at the gate of the holy city. Let's go. Bedivere should be in trouble. In the mysterious Atlas courtyard, the famous Detective Holmes was bringing Chaldea's group to tour the interior of the Atlas courtyard. The strange cross-shaped defense facility made of alchemy materials produced a mechanical sound.
On the cross-shaped defense facility, the 4 mechanical tentacles bent, and the mechanical mouth in the center of the cross shot out an energy ray.
Bang! However, the ray was blocked by a shield. Accompanied by the roar of the girl, Flying Dance raised her shield and smashed it on the cross-shaped defense facility. Ka-cha! Boom! Finally, the cross-shaped defense facility produced a small explosion. The shock wave caused by the explosion was blocked by the giant shield. Master, the last one has been eliminated.
Thus, the shield-holding girl reported to her master behind her.
Well, it's been hard on you, Matthew, Godotzi said gratefully. It's what I should do, senior. Matthew smiled, turned the giant shield into a spirit seed, and stood beside Godotzi. It's been hard on you, Miss Matthew. Although these defense facilities are not strong, they are still a headache for a caster like me.
A hearty male voice came from behind, and then Holmes, who was holding a cane and a pipe, appeared.
It's normal for this to come from my mouth. You're a detective who knows Baflo. Then, a profiteer-like female voice came from behind Holmes, and then Da Vinci's wife with Mona Lisa's face appeared. A famous detective always has an assistant who can help him, and my combat power is really not high now. Holmes didn't blush at all, took a puff of his pipe, and explained very calmly. Mr. Holmes, Da Vinci's wife. Matthew greeted the two. As expected of Matthew, very polite. It's been hard on you this time, Matthew. Da Vinci also thanked Matthew. Well, there's no need to say polite words. Are we here, Mr. Holmes? Godotzi looked at Holmes.
Well, it's right in front of us,
Holmes said. At the entrance of Atlas Yard, Holmes took the initiative to answer the question of why he was there after announcing his real name. Holmes said that as a detective, he had to solve all the mysteries, including the burning of humanity. And in Atlas Courtyard, it was a necessary investigation to solve the puzzle.
The main reason why he was here was to meet Chaldea and the others who saw the burning of humanity, which was Godotzi and the others.
After all, they were the only eyewitnesses. As a detective, he naturally needed the testimony of the eyewitnesses. Although Godotzi and Matthew believed Holmes, Hassan was obviously full of distrust for this inexplicable man. But because Arash and Da Vinci chose to trust him, Hassan could only leave it at that.
After all, the other party was here to find Godotzi and the others, and Godotzi and the others were willing to believe him.
One was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. Hassan didn't have to be stubborn at all. After that, Holmes said that he wanted to take Chaldea and the others to tour Atlas Courtyard, and Da Vinci, who couldn't resist the temptation, immediately agreed. As a last resort, Gurdaz, Mashu, and Leonardo da Vinci followed Holmes into Atlas Academy. As for Hassan and Arash, there was no doubt that they were abandoned. Chapter 788. Holmes rejected Arash and Hassan's entry with the reason that they have no need to enter at all. Arash was fine with it, but Hassan's bad temper couldn't be tolerated, and Cursed Wrist Hassan also thought that Holmes was full of problems. In the end, after Godotzi and Da Vinci's comfort and persuasion, Hassan and Arash became gatekeepers. Holmes, Godotzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci entered Atlas Yard. Da Vinci was making a fuss along the way, while Godotzi and Matthew answered Holmes' questions. Finally, after defeating the Guardian boss step by step, everyone finally arrived at their destination. The defense facility that Matthew just destroyed was the last gatekeeper. Before entering the destination, Holmes looked at Godotzi and spoke with emphasis. Fujimaru, do you remember my analysis? Of course I remember, Holmes. You said that King Solomon's burning of humanity was actually completed, so he was dismissive of humans. Correction, it was inferred from your testimony. Holmes took a puff from his pipe and corrected. However, Godotzi just smiled awkwardly. I remember Mr. Holmes also said that King Solomon was preparing the next plan. In order to avoid Gudatzi's embarrassment, Matthew spoke up. So, do you know what that plan is? Because of Holmes's real name, Mashu, who was standing at the entrance of the Atlas courtyard, was excited for a while. But this also made Holmes fully realize that Miss Mashu was his loyal fan. Holmes naturally answered all the questions from his fans. Of course I don't know. Such a righteous answer made Gudatzi almost fall down, and Matthew also didn't know what to say. As for Da Vinci, she was still enthusiastically studying the pile of defense facilities that Matthew destroyed. It could be said that Leonardo da Vinci had to study for a while every time he passed a level. Nothing could be done about it. The alchemy techniques of the Atlas courtyard had aroused da Vinci's interest. Or it could be said that da Vinci was already interested in the alchemy techniques of the Atlas courtyard. Finally, he turned to look at Holmes, who still did not show any signs of discomfort. If you don't know, you don't know. It's such a simple principle, isn't it? Although I don't know King Solomon's next plan, I have found some clues in the plan of burning humanity. After Holmes finished speaking, he walked to the front door. Come with me, said Holmes, opening the door and going in. Without any hesitation, Gudatzi and Matthew entered side by side. Upon seeing the new map, Da Vinci followed them immediately. After entering, both Gudatzi and Matthew's pupils shrank. Where is this? Inside the Holy City, because they had lost the gate and most of the knights, there weren't many enemies on the streets. But similarly, there weren't any humans around. It's too cold here, Wu Ming walked on the street, looking at the empty interior of the Holy City and frowning. Could it be that the people who entered the Holy City were treated as specimens and stored in the Holy Spear as Gawain said at the beginning? While Wu Ming was pondering, Gabriel was not idle. Soon, she discovered that the magical fluctuations in a certain place were more intense. Master, there should be someone fighting over there. Gabriel pointed in a certain direction. Let's go and take a look. If I'm not wrong, it should be Bedivere. After all, apart from Wu Ming, Gabriel, and Bedivere, there were no other enemies here. Yes. Gabriel flapped her wings and flew ahead of Wu Ming. Wu Ming didn't land and flew in the direction Gabriel flew. After turning a corner, Wu Ming saw the scene of Aguin leading a team of knights to surround Bedivere. Bedivere was dealing with the knights, while Gabriel, who had arrived first, was fighting with Aguin. Bedivere's body had been treated by Wu Ming's healing potion. Although it only treated the symptoms and not the root cause, it was enough for now. But because he was a human, if Bedivere didn't use Silver Arm, he wouldn't be able to defeat them under the encirclement of the knights. But protecting himself wasn't a problem. And logically speaking, Gabriel was much stronger than Aguin, but for some reason, Gabriel couldn't take down Aguin in a short time. Wu Ming carefully looked at Aguin and discovered that the veins under Wu Ming's skin were bulging as though they were about to explode, just like a berserker. Not only that, but Wu Ming could also feel that Aguin's mana had increased by leaps and bounds, as well as his other abilities. That was why Gabriel couldn't take down Aguin in a short time. Could it be that Aguin received the blessing? Wu Ming guessed. Or is it the result of using a large number of berserk runes? Apart from receiving the blessing of the Lion King's Holy Grail, using a large number of berserk runes could also reach Aguin's current state. But it's only a dead end. Wu Ming helplessly shook his head. Then, Wu Ming took out Meteor Silver from his noble artifact space and rushed towards Aguin. And Aguin had already discovered Wu Ming the moment he appeared, but because of Gabriel's entanglement, Aguin couldn't pay attention to Wu Ming. And Wu Ming actually rushed forward himself, which was completely in line with Aguin's intentions. Villo! Aguin bellowed, suddenly flinging Gabriel aside and rushing towards Wu Ming. Asterisk clang. BZZT BZZT BZZT. Asterisk Meteor Silver and Aguin's knight's great sword collided. After an ear-piercing collision sound, the two swords clashed and produced sparks. Go help Bedivere. Wu Ming glanced at Gabriel. Gabriel, who was flung away by Aguin, wanted to fight Aguin again, but since Wu Ming said so, she could only give up. And so, Gabriel vented her resentment on the solemn knights. Villo ah! Aguin bellowed again, causing Wu Ming to shift his gaze. Wu Ming's expression turned solemn. He could feel that Aguin's strength was growing bit by bit, and Wu Ming felt that he would soon be unable to suppress Aguin. As someone who was extremely close to Wu Ming, Aguan could naturally feel the changes in Wu Ming. Ha ha ha! How is it? Villo! This is the power of the Holy Grail's blessing and berserk runes. How is it? Isn't it very powerful? Ahahaha! Chapter 789. Wu Ming didn't guess wrong. But Wu Ming was only half right. Not only did Agravain receive the Holy Grail's blessing, he also used the berserk spell. This caused Agravain's ability to improve by leaps and bounds, so much so that Wu Ming had to take Agravain seriously. But the drawbacks are also very clear. Ager Regulus. Wu Ming was right. After receiving the Holy Grail's blessing and the berserk spell, Agravain's mental state was not as good as before. From an outsider's point of view, he was like a mental patient who had just escaped from a mental hospital, and a rather dangerous one at that. Ha ha ha. You're right. But as long as I defeat you, everything will be over. No one can be my king's opponent. And as long as you're not here, my king won't fall asleep every day to miss you. Just like that, everything will be over. Ahahaha. Agravain said, and a large amount of magic instantly gushed out, and Wu Ming was violently pushed away. You're saying that Artoria falls asleep every day to miss me. Wu Ming didn't pay attention to Ajerguawan's other words, but he was rather moved by Ajerguawan's line of, I fall asleep every day to miss you. If you miss someone so much that you have to fall asleep every day, and relieve it through sleep and dreams, then that person must be very important to you. Wu Ming had an unrealistic thought. Everything the Lion King was doing was actually for him. However, Agravain didn't have the intention to answer Wu Ming's doubts. Agravain raised his knight's sword that emitted endless magic and madly charged at Wu Ming. Die 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 ha 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 ha. With messy black hair, blood-like runes engraved on his black armor, and bloodshot and slightly protruding eyes, Agravain opened his mouth wide and roared like a beast. It seemed that after meeting the person he was obsessed with, Agravain had completely lost his mind. Right now, Agurvan only wanted to eliminate the individual named Villo Siranthad. Oh! Agravain roared as he leaped up, aimed his sword at Wu Ming, and smashed it down. As for Wu Ming, he naturally couldn't be hit. As soon as Agravain jumped up, Wu Ming used his mana to suddenly jump back out of Agravain's attack range. Thud! Along with the sound of the knight's boots landing on the ground, Wu Ming silently watched Ajerguawan raise his sword once more. Looks like I was wrong, Wu Ming said. Wu Ming was wrong. The most serious mistake he made was that he didn't trust Artoria. He didn't stand on her side. I clearly said that I would always be with her, but in the end, I stood on the opposite side of her. Wu Ming's eyes dimmed slightly. Even if his intentions were good, even if everything was for the sake of the world, and no matter how many excuses he came up with, Wu Ming was on the opposite side of Artoria. There was no doubt about that. If I had responded to Artoria's summon at the beginning, or if I had stood on Artoria's side after coming to the singularity, I'm afraid the outcome would have been much better. In that case, Mordred, Tristan, and Gawain wouldn't be sent away by his own hands. As for Agwawan, he probably wouldn't fall into such a state of madness that he hates the most. Wu Ming had no intention of dodging when he saw Agwawan charging at him again. It was as if he had accepted his fate. Roar! Agwawan let out an inhuman roar, and the curse of madness spread all over his face. Let me take the pain for you. Wu Ming closed his eyes, and Agwawan's knight's sword arrived in front of Wu Ming. Friend. As soon as Agwawan's voice fell, he could clearly see the magic power sweeping across the surroundings, and the entire atmosphere froze. On the other hand, Agawin was frozen in midair as though he was frozen in ice. His knight's greatsword also stopped in front of Wu Ming. Wu Ming, on the other hand, opened his eyes at this moment. He opened his golden eyes that had turned pure gold at some point in time. Noble and powerful, wise and kind, mysterious and wise God, I shall obtain the divine power of the heavens, the blessing of the earth, and the wisdom of men from you. Thus, I shall become a miracle and lead the world to the dawn. Wu Ming's godlike words came out of his mouth, mysterious and profound. Magician incarnation. Activate. He placed his hand on Agwawan's knight's sword, and without saying a word, he squeezed it gently. With the help of a magic circle that faintly flashed,
Guowen's night sword instantly turned into dust and disappeared with the wind.
Crash. Wu Ming spoke out the name of the spell he was using as if he was the first to speak. It was as simple as the name itself. Crash. Wu Ming waved his hand, and with the support of Magician Incarnation, several Lune runes appeared in the air and attached themselves to Guowen's body. The runes had the effects of awaken, dispel, and purify. In addition to the support of Magician Incarnation, the effect was even more outstanding. In just an instant, the scarlet runes on Guowen's body disappeared completely. However, what was more serious was that Guowen's armor was almost completely shattered, and Guowen's body was also shattered. Wu Ming retracted his magic power, and Guowen fell to the ground. Velo. Sir. Guowen looked at Wu Ming weakly. You defeated me again. Ha! Guowen wanted to laugh at himself, but in the end, he was too weak to do so. At the same time, Guowen's body was also gradually dissipating. That was the precursor to his exit. The blessing of the Holy Grail and a large number of berserk runes with serious side effects had already caused Guowen's spirit base to start collapsing. When Guowen said that everything would be over, he was actually referring to himself. Vero. Lord. I am truly envious of you, being able to accompany my king. Guowen's body began to crumble even faster as he forced himself to finish his last sentence. I really hope to be able to defeat you. Once. As soon as he finished speaking, there was nothing left in front of Wu Ming. Only bits of blue light were left, and they disappeared with the wind. Chapter 790. Gudatzi and Matthew, who followed Holmes into the room, were stunned. Because the room in front of them was very similar to Chaldea's control room. This is Chaldea? What the hell is going on? Gudatzi held her head in shock. This was an empty Chaldea control room without any equipment such as the Chaldea lens and the Shiba lens. There was also no ceiling. Although Matthew was not as shocked as Gudatzi, he was still very shocked. No, sir. Although this place is very similar to Chaldea's control room, this is not Chaldea. Holmes was not surprised that Matthew could make such a judgment. Because, although this place was very similar to Chaldea's control room, in many aspects, this place was completely different from Chaldea's control room. After all, as mentioned before, this place was very similar to Chaldea's control room. Miss Matthews' judgment is very correct, and instead of saying that this place is very similar to Chaldea's control room, it's better to say that Chaldea is very similar to this place. With a hearty smile on his face, Holmes explained to Matthew and Gudatzi. Then, he walked to the center of the control room. At this time, Da Vinci also spoke. Ah, you still don't know. Da Vinci was not shocked at all, as if he already knew. There is such a rumor in Chaldea. Da Vinci smiled mysteriously, then continued. It is said that the Chaldea control room was designed according to the workshop in Atlas Courtyard. What? Gudatzi and Matthew were both stunned. They really did not know this news. Although they more or less did not believe Da Vinci's so-called rumor, such a rumor was probably only known by the higher-ups of Chaldea. However, what Da Vinci said was not unreasonable. Now that this singularity was older than Chaldea, then there must be Atlas Courtyard first, and then Chaldea control room. In this case, if there must be a distinction between who came first, it must be Atlas Courtyard first, and Chaldea second. Da Vinci is right. Chaldea's control room was indeed modeled after Atlas Courtyard, or it was with the help of Chaldea Courtyard that Chaldea was established. Holmes followed Da Vinci's words. I'm curious how you know so much. Da Vinci narrowed his eyes. Even she, the second servant of Chaldea, didn't know Chaldea very well, but Holmes knew Chaldea's affairs, as if he was the mastermind behind the scenes. Ha ha ha, because this is Atlas Courtyard, there is nothing that can't escape. At this point, Holmes changed his words. Except for that, everything in this world can't escape the records here. Holmes said, pointing to the 3 giant stone tablets standing in this place. Because it was open air, the sun scattered here and shone on the 3 towering giant stone tablets. 3-pointed Hermes. Da Vinci slowly read the names of the 3 giant stone tablets. 3-pointed Hermes. Matthew took a deep breath. 3-pointed Hermes. Gudatzi was the same, but Gudatzi was not finished yet. What is that? Inside the Holy City, on the street near the central Holy Tower, Wu-ming, Jillian, and Bedivere flew, side by side on it. When Wu-ming used magician incarnation, the surrounding solemn night had been stunned by the magic power released by Wu-ming. The result of the solemn night was naturally taken care of by Jillian and Bedivere. As a result, the three people who were no longer blocked set foot on the road to the central Holy Tower. Master, are you okay? Jillian floated beside Wu-ming and asked cautiously. Since Aguin's exit, Wu-ming's whole person changed slightly. Jillian couldn't tell the change in Wu-ming, but she could feel it. Wu-ming shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Bedivere also saw the change in Wu-ming. So, Bedivere spoke. Master Villo, why don't you take the holy sword? Before Bedivere could finish, Wu-ming stretched out his hand, indicating that Bedivere should stop talking. I'm fine. Bedivere. You have to return the holy sword yourself. Your 1,000 years of waiting is not something I can replace. Hearing that, Bedivere's face became firm and showed an affirmative expression. After that, Wu-ming stopped, and so did Jillian and Bedivere. Because they had reached the foot of the Holy Tower. Let's go, Bedivere. Wu-ming called out to Bedivere and started walking. What about me? What about me? Master. Have you forgotten about me? Giliel was instantly unhappy. Why did he only call out Bedivere's name? Don't I have to follow? Wu-ming turned his head and smiled. No need, Jillian. After all, this is your master's personal matter. You go to Tachika and the others. Wu-ming finished speaking, and a portal instantly appeared above Jillian's head. Before Gopril could react, the teleportation gate started to fall as if it was affected by gravity. As a result, Jillian was swallowed by the portal. When she fell to the ground, the portal disappeared, and so did Jillian. Wu-ming glanced at Bedivere, and Bedivere nodded, indicating that he was ready. The two walked up the Holy Tower step by step. Because the Knights of Solemnity were almost completely wiped out. No, it should be said that they were completely wiped out. No enemies came out to obstruct Wu-ming and Bedivere. The troops led by Adger were the last batch of Knights of Solemnity, and the only remaining Knights of the Round Table besides him was Lancelot. But because Lancelot was not in the Holy City, there were no enemies in the Holy City. Without the slightest pause, Wu-ming and Bedivere were only one floor away from reaching the top. At this time, a beautiful figure appeared in front of Wu-ming and Bedivere. Your Highness the Queen. Bedivere immediately knelt on one knee. That's right, the beautiful figure was Guinevere. Minister Bedivere, no need to be so courteous. Guinevere said softly. Guinevere's meaning was very simple. Now that Bedivere was considered a rebel, there was no need for him to salute the enemy queen. This left Bedivere speechless. He wanted to explain, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know what to say. Bedivere, you go up first. Wu-ming said to Bedivere. Although he didn't understand Wu-ming's actions, Bedivere had already carried out Wu-ming's order. Bedivere walked up the stairs step by step, leaving Wu-ming and Guinevere looking at each other. Chapter 791. From the looks of it, you should know already. Guinevere crossed his arms and walked down the stairs to Wu-ming. Guinevere was talking about Artoria. Aguin gave me a hint. Wu-ming nodded. Then, Wu-ming showed a helpless smile. By the way, did you know from the beginning? Guinevere shook his head. After you came to the Holy City and left, the king talked to me a lot. I only knew then. Guinevere extended his hands. Although Wu-ming was wearing armor, Guinevere didn't wear a helmet, so Guinevere touched Wu-ming's cheek. Wu-ming didn't reject Guinevere's overdone action as he enjoyed Guinevere's touch. As expected, I can't win against the king no matter what I do. Guinevere touched Wu-ming's face and showed a bitter smile. Although the smile was uglier than crying. Sorry, Liar's above you. Wu-ming's eyes were calm as he spoke the truth without hiding anything. It wasn't irresponsible. On the contrary, it was the most responsible thing to do in Guinevere's opinion. I know, that's why I can't win against the king no matter what. Guinevere raised his head and tried his best not to cry. Guinevere's love for Wu-ming was no less than the others. Whether it was falling into Morgan Le Fay's trap in the end, or descending as a berserker because of his obsession with Wu Ming, it was obvious that Guinevere had feelings for Wu Ming. But Wu Ming smiled. "I didn't say that I would give up on you if I chose Lia, Miss Guinevere." Wu Ming touched Guinevere's cheek and wiped away the tears at the corner of Guinevere's eyes with a proud smile. "This isn't Britain. I can't do whatever I want. I won't spare either you or Lia." Wu Ming's domineering and gentle words stunned Guinevere for a moment. When he reacted, Guinevere smiled. "Really, Sir Villo is really overbearing." She rubbed Wu Ming's hand, but because of the gauntlet, it didn't feel very good. "I'll be waiting for you, Mr. Villo." After Guinevere finished speaking, he leaned into Wu Ming's embrace, stood on his tiptoes, and wrapped his hands around Wu Ming's neck before gently kissing him. Guinevere looked at Wu Ming with eyes full of love, and then gently closed his eyes. Although Wu Ming was a little surprised, he immediately reacted and hugged Guinevere. He closed his eyes and enjoyed this moment of peace. After a brief kiss, the two of them separated their heads from each other. Because Wu Ming sucked it clean, he didn't pull the thread or anything like that. Cough cough. "Humph, really, Sir Villo, I didn't expect you to be so skilled." Guinevere's cheeks were slightly red as he lay in Wu Ming's embrace with love in his eyes. Wu Ming was not a newbie, but Guinevere's movements were still immature, but he was still quite skilled. "I've practiced before, but what's wrong with you?" Wu Ming deliberately pretended to be angry. This time, Guinevere was truly frightened. "Sir Villo, I didn't practice with anyone else. It's just that sometimes when I look in the mirror." Guinevere covered his mouth and blushed. "It's just a joke." "I'll say it again. I'll always believe you." Wu Ming patted Guinevere's head and apologized. Although it was just a joke, Wu Ming was quite proud that he got Guinevere to talk. "Sir Villo, you're so..." Guinevere lowered his head. But it was time to end this. When he looked up again, Guinevere's cheeks were still blushing. "Sir Villo, this is the kiss I promised you. I'll always be waiting for you." "Aha, it's a promise." In front of the three-pointed Hermes in the Atlas courtyard, Holmes explained a lot, but Godotzi didn't understand the three-pointed Hermes at all. After all, Godotzi's magic theory wasn't enough. So Holmes gave a rather simple explanation of Goo Goo. In the end, Da Vinci summarized it with one sentence. Simply put, it's a world-class encyclopedia that answers all questions. "I see, it's a bit like the internet on a computer." Godotzi clenched her left fist and punched her right hand. "Senior's analogy is very apt," Matthew said awkwardly. "As long as you understand." Holmes took a puff from his pipe and smiled. Just like a detective, there were many mysterious events that couldn't be understood. But those weren't important. As long as there were completely reliable clues and logical reasoning, the famous detective could find the murderer. It was as simple as 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Although sometimes it was equal to 3. Ahem, all in all, as long as you understand. While I was in the Atlas courtyard, I used this three-pointed Hermes to search for a lot of information about human combustion. Holmes turned his back to Godotzi and the others. "So, Mr. Holmes, did you solve the mystery?" Miss Matthew, who was a fan of Holmes, was very excited. "Ahem, that's not the point." Holmes tilted his head and looked at Matthew. "I can't believe Roman." "What? There's something wrong with Dr. Roman?" Godotzi repeated Holmes' words in shock. "But why?" Matthew was also puzzled by Holmes' words. No one was surprised that Holmes knew about Roman. After all, this was the Atlas courtyard. Holmes could even collect information about Godotzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci. It was impossible that Roman, the head of a normal Chaldea medical institution, couldn't collect information about him. According to my investigation, in the Holy Grail War in 2004, Maris Billy Animsphia was also involved. Holmes' voice came. "Animsphia? This surname, could it be?" Godotzi was stunned. She didn't know Maris Billy, but she noticed this person's surname. It was the same surname as Olga Marie. "That's right, sir. Maris Billy Animsphia is the former director of Chaldea, the father of director Olga Marie," Matthew confirmed. After slaughtering the other 6 participants in the Holy Grail War, he won the final victory and obtained the Holy Grail, Holmes continued. Wait, that means the former director had already obtained a holy grail before the Anthropocene? Matthew was shocked.
Then what did the former director wish for?
Gudatsi asked curiously.
Ahem, that's still not the point.
Holmes shook his head again.
The point is, in that war, Maris Billy also fought with an assistant, and this assistant was specially promoted to Chaldea the next year and became the head of the medical institution in Chaldea at the age of 22.
After that, Holmes took a puff from his pipe and exhaled.
That person, could it be? Matthew opened his eyes wide and said slowly.
Yes, that person is Roman. At this time, Da Vinci, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. Chapter 792. Is it possible that the doctor really has a problem? Seeing that Da Vinci admitted that the man was Roman, Gudatsi began to believe what Holmes said about Roman has a problem. Matthew's eyes also showed shock and doubt. After all the blame was directed at Dr. Roman.
No, Holmes' reasoning is completely wrong.
Da Vinci's words were rather cruel, as if he was defending Holmes for suspecting Roman.
This made Holmes shrug his shoulders helplessly and take a puff from his pipe.
Then, Da Vinci looked at Gudatsi and Matthew. Tachika, Matthew, I can only tell you that although Roman has his own secrets, he is absolutely not a problem. You have to remember this. Da Vinci's sapphire-like eyes were full of seriousness. Being looked at by these serious eyes, Gudatsi and Matthew's body could not help but tighten. Immediately, Gudatsi immediately reacted. Yes, Da Vinci. I'll remember it. Gudatsi stood up straight and answered Leonardo da Vinci seriously. I also remember, Da Vinci. I'm sorry that we have doubts about Dr. Roman.
Matthew was quite guilty, and his small head could not help but lower.
Don't feel guilty, Matthew. All of this is related to Holmes' reasoning error. If you want to blame someone, blame him. Da Vinci said the most terrible words with the most beautiful face. Ha ha ha, I really appreciate that. For Da Vinci's joke, Holmes was also very cooperative. Of course he did not care. With Da Vinci's guarantee, then I will temporarily put Dr. Roman on the alibi list. After all, with the three-pointed Hermes, Holmes also knew that as one of the first servants to appear in Chaldea, Da Vinci was a founding father-level figure. Since there was Da Vinci's guarantee, it was not impossible to believe Roman for the time being. However, Roman was still under Holmes' suspicion.
After all, Holmes had said, for now.
Oh right.
Gudatsi suddenly shouted.
Mr. Holmes, can this three-pointed Hermes help us find the location of the Sun King? Gudatsi suddenly had an idea. After all, their purpose in coming to the desert this time was not to look for the Atras Academy, but to conquer the Sun King. After all, Sherlock Holmes had said that apart from a certain existence that could not be recorded by the three-pointed Hermes, everything in this world was recorded by the three-pointed Hermes. In that case, it should be possible to get Holmes to help find out where the Sun King was. Don't worry about that. Someone will take you to the Sun King later.
Holmes laughed heartily.
Will someone take us there? Gudatsi didn't understand.
She couldn't imagine who would take them to the Sun King.
Well, it's time for you to go. Holmes didn't continue to explain to Gudatsi and started to drive them away. Mr. Holmes, are you not going to come with us? Matthew opened his big eyes and looked puzzled. According to the past practice, new friendly servants should act together with them. I won't. I still have some things to do here. Holmes refused. Since Holmes said so, Gudatsi and others couldn't say anything more. After looking at Da Vinci, who nodded in agreement, Gudatsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci left and returned to the entrance of Atras Academy. After Gudatsi and others left, Holmes took a puff from his pipe and puffed out the smoke in his mouth. So, let's start a new round of reasoning, my friend. Holmes turned his head, and a silver-white figure was reflected in Holmes' retina. In the central tower of the Holy City, Wu Ming didn't delay at all. After saying goodbye to Guinevere, he went to the highest floor. What was reflected in Wu Ming's eyes was Bedivere, who was kneeling on one knee as if he was offering something. With a satisfied expression, his body turned into debris and was blown away by the wind from afar. And in front of the broken Bedivere, there was no doubt that the fully armed Lion King, Artoria Pendragon. Although Wu Ming wasn't very clear about what Bedivere did during the time when he didn't come up, he could guess it even if he guessed. Return the holy sword. Only by returning the holy sword, Bedivere, who had lost his obsession, would his body, which had lived for thousands of years, collapse. After all, the human body will undoubtedly turn into dust after thousands of years. But in this way, after returning the holy sword, Artoria's holy spear should also disappear. Anyway, Wuming didn't see the holy spear in Artoria's hand.
Villo, no, I should call you Wuming, right?
Artoria, who was fully armed and whose face couldn't be seen, said while disarming her armor. She was still wearing the revealing blue tights and a small red cloak on the collar. But the point was that Artoria's eyes, which were originally shining, had lost its light. It wasn't the so-called highlight, but it felt different. The original Lion King Artoria was like a goddess, but now, Artoria's goddess aura had basically completely disappeared. Instead, she was more like a king who understood people's hearts. Well, she understood people's hearts in all aspects. I'm sorry. For Artoria to be able to say Wuming's name, Wuming wasn't surprised at all. Although it was a long time ago, Wuming still remembered that Wuming once told Artoria his name. Artoria didn't react to Wuming's apology. After all, she had grown up and was no longer the little girl who didn't understand people's hearts. I don't accept your apology, Artoria said righteously and frankly.
Well.
Wuming was speechless, but it was also within Wuming's expectations. It wasn't that Artoria didn't accept Wuming's apology, but because Wuming was prepared for any response from Artoria, whether positive or negative. After all, no matter if she was a girl or a queen, as long as she was a woman, her thoughts and actions were not something you could understand in a short time. I'm sorry, I'll let you do whatever you want, but please let me know before I die. Wuming said as he walked toward Artoria. The plan you prepared, is it really for me? However, Artoria was thinking about Peach. Of course not. Chapter 793. Wuming didn't know what to say for a while. I'm doing this for the sake of the humans. But I summoned the Knights of the Round Table to see if I could find you, Artoria said without changing her expression. As expected of the Queen.
But why did I hear from Guinevere that you summoned her here to look for me?
Before they came up, Guinevere briefly explained the situation to Wuming when he was cuddling with Guinevere. Because Guinevere was obsessed with Wuming, Guinevere, as a berserker, had the ability to search for Wuming. It was called Wuming Radar. Artoria wanted to use this ability of Guinevere's to summon Guinevere. Otherwise, why would Artoria bring the useless queen here? To be a pretty vase? Artoria said that looking in the mirror every day was enough. Artoria didn't say anything. She just closed her eyes.
Then, Artoria opened her eyes and stared at Wuming with her amber eyes.
She is talking nonsense, said Artoria, who was talking nonsense with a straight face. Ignoring Artoria's words, Wuming continued. Guinevere also told me that you sleep every day to vent your longing for me. You try to relieve your longing with dreams. After Wuming said that, Artoria's face blushed. She looked like a girl whose secret was exposed.
I'm kidding.
Wuming showed a mischievous smile. Guinevere didn't tell Wuming this. After all, Guinevere wasn't a roundworm in Artoria's stomach. How could he know a secret that Artoria didn't tell him? Wuming's words made Artoria speechless.
If it was the younger me, I'd probably be mad at you right now, Artoria said with nostalgia.
Of course, Artoria was referring to the younger me, before she became a queen.
Maybe I won't be mad at you like a little girl anymore.
As a queen, she had to look at the big picture. No matter what, as a queen, she had to be steady and reliable. Artoria, who wanted to become an ideal queen, had already met her ideal requirements.
So what?
Wuming didn't think there was anything wrong with Artoria like this. As long as we love each other, nothing is a problem. Walking in front of Artoria, Wuming put on his most perfect smile. Artoria also smiled. Artoria, with the corners of her mouth slightly raised, looked quite handsome and beautiful at this moment. As expected, you can only be my queen. Guinevere had no choice but to step aside. Artoria said as she grabbed Wuming's armor by the collar and pulled him in front of her. Wait a minute, Liu. Staring at Artoria, who was about to kiss him and savor her sweet scent, Wuming blushed for the first time. As a queen, I don't care about small things. I want to admit that I miss you, because I want you to be my queen, Artoria said in a domineering tone. Wu Ming was stunned.
No, but...
Wu Ming was at a loss for words. He did not know what to say. Normally, such words would be said by a man like him,
as expected of a queen. It's useless to say more.
This is a punishment for not being on my side. It's also compensation for missing you, Artoria said as she kissed Wu Ming. Wu Ming was stunned because he was kissed by force. But he immediately reacted. After all, he had to take the initiative for this kind of thing. He took off the armor and hugged Artoria. Wu Ming began a new enjoyment. However, before the two could go deeper, a terrifying lightning strike was launched from a distance. The target was the location of Wu Ming and Artoria, the tallest holy tower in the holy city. A violent explosion occurred. Boom! In a desert pit, at the entrance of the Atlas courtyard, Hassan and Cursed Wrist Hassan paced back and forth uneasily. Quiet Hassan was quietly squatting in the corner, but the anxiety in his eyes was no less than the other two Hassans.
Arash, on the other hand, came to the sandpit rather calmly and carefully investigated the situation nearby.
After a round of investigation, Arash walked down the sandpit and began to rest. It was a shift change. Because there was no need for everyone to investigate together, they agreed to do it one by one so that the other servants could also rest. What's wrong, everyone? Are you still worried? Arash saw the look on Hassan's faces and said in a cheerful tone, trying to pull everyone out of their depression.
Well, after all, that Holmes is very suspicious.
Cursed Wrist Hassan stood up, and then it was his turn to investigate the surroundings. Master Chaldea, they just went in with him. It was a reckless move. Hassan's tone was a bit harsh. Wasn't that right? He was worried about their safety, so he followed them. In the end, he was rejected. Anyone would probably be angry. But Master Tachika and the others seemed to trust that Wu Ming quite a bit. Because the other party had a good relationship with Wu Ming, he was also respected by Quiet Hassan. Well, Ms. Da Vinci and Ms. Matthew are very reliable servants. They will be fine. Arash comforted everyone. I hope so. Cursed Wrist Hassan said, jumped into the sandpit, and began to investigate. Hassan and Quiet Hassan did not speak again. Although Arash did not know these two, he also knew that these two did not like to talk, so he sat down and rested. Just then, the door of the Atlas courtyard opened. Gudatsi, Matthew, and Da Vinci drove out in 2 trucks with messy things. This made Big Face Hassan, Quiet Hassan, and Arash startled. They thought that something had run out of the Atlas courtyard. Hey, everyone, Da Vinci is back. Da Vinci, who was in charge of driving, said in a lively tone. Gudatsi and Matthew, who were sitting behind Da Vinci, smiled awkwardly. This car was temporarily put together by Da Vinci with the fragments of the alchemy creations on the way back. The purpose was naturally to collect the alchemy creations that Da Vinci was interested in along the way. Because Da Vinci used wood and minerals to make cars, Gudatsi and Matthew were not surprised that Da Vinci could make a car. What are you guys doing? Arash looked at the messy things on the car and was a little puzzled. Ahaha. Da Vinci wanted to pick them up personally. We couldn't help it. Gudatsi scratched the back of her head. This was also why they were so slow. It did not take much time to fight all the way back, but on the way back, they had to pick up garbage and wait for Da Vinci to make a car. That was why they were delayed for so long. It's good that nothing happened. Did Holmes do anything to you? Hassan asked worriedly. No, Mr. Holmes just gave us a tour of the Atra's court. Mashu smiled. It was better to hide the things that Holmes told them about the burning of humanity. It's good that you are fine. Quiet Hassan nodded. At this time, Cursed Wrist Hassan suddenly rushed down. Not good, we are surrounded. Chapter 794. What? Whether it was Hassan, Arash, Gudatsi, or Matthew, everyone was shocked. We're surrounded? Da Vinci did not panic. Instead, he sat in the car and thought about something. Mr. Cursed Wrist Hassan, did you see who the enemy is? After getting out of the car, Matthew immediately asked Cursed Wrist Hassan who had just gone to investigate.
They're from the Holy City. The leader is the Knight of the Round Table, Lancelot, Cursed Wrist Hassan said in a heavy tone. Hassan had dealt with the Knights of the Round Table for a long time and naturally knew them. However, it was because of this that Cursed Wrist Hassan's tone was heavy. Lancelot is known as the strongest person below the British Silver Dragon. It is said that other than the British Silver Dragon Villo, no one among the Knights of the Round Table can defeat him. Even Gawain, who was favored by the sun, was defeated by Lancelot in the mythical history records. Lancelot. Matthew was a little stunned as if he was thinking about something.
Are you okay, Matthew?
Gudazzi, who got out of the car with Matthew, held Matthew's hand and asked with concern.
I'm fine, Senior.
After all, that knight Lancelot is Mr. Galahad's father. I'm about to face Mr. Lancelot. I feel a little strange. Matthew explained the reason with a strange expression. Don't worry, Matthew. Even if your father comes, I'll be by your side to support you. Gudazzi thought that Matthew, who was affected by the Galahad spiritual base, was afraid of facing his father. Hence, she encouraged Matthew. However, Matthew looked embarrassed. No, Senior. How should I put it? I don't know why, but I just want to go out and teach Mr. Lancelot a lesson. Matthew's eyes turned cold. So it's not that you're afraid of being close to your father. This time, it was Gudazzi's turn to be embarrassed. All right. Tachika and Matthew, both of you calm down. It's not certain whether we'll fight or not. Da Vinci made a sound and signaled Gudazzi and Matthew to calm down first. Gudazzi and Matthew subconsciously repeated, It's not certain whether we'll fight or not. Miss Da Vinci, why would you say that? Cursed Wrist Hassan walked up to Da Vinci and wanted to ask. He did not think that the Knights of the Round Table would let Hassan go, nor did he think that the Knights of the Round Table would let Chaldea go. Although the phrase, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits, was well said, there was no benefit between them. The other party wanted to kill them all, and Chaldea's men had to protect the people that the other party wanted to kill. Therefore, to them who had already become enemies and had no benefits, there was no need for them to reconcile. Not to mention that the other party was a Knight of the Round Table who obeyed the Lion King's every command, so it was even more impossible for them to negotiate. Well, after all, we can't run away, right? Da Vinci got off the car and came to the ground. He patted his car. Although we can also rely on this car to try to rush out, the possibility of it being destroyed halfway is quite high. After walking to the back of the crowd, Da Vinci turned around. So, let's see what the other party's intentions are. Gudazzi and Matthew were the first to nod. After all, there was no other way. Cursed Wrist Hassan, Hundred Face Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan looked at each other, and then nodded after getting the consent of the other two. In that case, let me be the vanguard. After all, someone had to make contact with the other party first to determine the other party's intentions. Otherwise, if everyone went to talk to the other party together and the other party was hostile, they would be walking right into a trap. Without waiting for Gudazzi and the others to agree, Arash jumped into the sandpit with a big stride. Mr. Arash. Matthew called out instinctively, but Arash had already left. Don't worry, Sir Matthew. Arash is not a weak existence. Cursed Wrist Hassan comforted him. After all, he was a great hero who tore the land apart. Let's go, everyone. Let's follow and take a look. Da Vinci suggested. After all, they had to cover for Arash. On the ground, at the edge of the sandpit, Gudazzi and the others were half squatting here, looking at Arash, who was in front of Lancelot's team. Arash, who was close to Lancelot's team, was not attacked by Lancelot. On the contrary, Lancelot seemed to be on the same side. Anyway, facing the vigilant Arash, Lancelot looked like he had a headache. Gudazzi and Matthew were confused. Is Lancelot really going to reconcile with us? Gudazzi said instinctively. I hope so. Whether it was on behalf of Galahad or as Matthew himself, Matthew hoped that Lancelot could stand on their side. Emotionally, Lancelot was Galahad's father, and Matthew did not want her and Lancelot to oppose each other. Logically, Lancelot was a powerful knight of the Round Table and a very reliable helper. Lancelot said something to Arash, and in the end, Lancelot had his team stay where they were. He kept a distance from Arash and followed Arash to the sandpit. It seemed that Lancelot was going to fight alone. When Lancelot approached, Cursed Wrist Hassan, Redeemer Hassan, and Tranquil Hassan immediately rushed out and surrounded Lancelot in a triangular formation.
Hassan, huh?
Please don't do anything. Please believe me. I'm on your side, Lancelot said calmly, as if it was a matter of course. You have no reason to be on our side, Cursed Wrist Hassan said vigilantly with a dagger in his hand. Looking at how vigilant Hassan was, and then looking at Godotzi, Matthew, and Da Vinci at the edge of the sandpit, Lancelot lowered his head subconsciously. In fact, it was because Lancelot saw Matthew and panicked for a moment. Matthew, Godotzi, and Da Vinci walked over and asked Lancelot. Mr. Lancelot, do you have any evidence to prove that you're on our side? Matthew looked impartial. Didn't Servillo tell you? Lancelot was puzzled. Godotzi and Matthew looked at each other and shook their heads. Servillo didn't tell me anything about you. Matthew's heartless words hurt Lancelot a little, but as a father, he had to be strong. Actually, Servillo came to me before, and I had already betrayed him, Lancelot explained. Then why did you lead your troops to attack my village? Cursed Wrist Hassan questioned. The dagger in his hand reflected the light of the sun, and it was chilling. As if responding to each other, Redeemer Hassan's dagger and Tranquil Hassan's poison blade also emitted a strange light. Servillo asked me to continue to stay as a spy under the king, so I had to lead my troops to attack your village. Lancelot tried to explain, but Redeemer Hassan was the first to voice his disbelief. Quibble. Godotzi and Matthew did not know what to do at the moment, and Arash also frowned. Da Vinci, on the other hand, smiled as if she had seen through everything, but she did not say anything. In this stalemate, a male voice came from behind Godotzi and the others. All right, everyone put down your weapons. Lancelot is one of us. Chapter 795. Assassin. Senior Villo. Sir Villo. The first to react were Godotzi, Matthew, and Quiet Hassan. Everyone looked behind them, and the newcomer was indeed Wuming. Jumping from the sandpit to the ground, Wuming patted the dust on his sleeves. Cursed Wrist, 100 Faces, put down your weapons. Lancelot is telling the truth. When he met me, I turned him into a traitor. The reason why he only called out Cursed Wrist Hassan and 100 Faces Hassan was that Quiet Hassan had already put down his weapon when Wuming spoke for the first time. So obedient. Cursed Wrist Hassan hesitated for a moment, then went into an attacking stance. However, 100 Faces Hassan aimed his weapon at Wuming. Maybe Lancelot found someone to impersonate you to confuse us. As soon as 100 Faces Hassan said that, Godotzi, who originally wanted to throw herself into Wuming's arms, stopped. Quiet Hassan, who was standing beside Wuming at some point, also became slightly vigilant. Indeed, what 100 Faces Hassan said was possible. After all, the timing of Wuming's appearance was too coincidental. In the face of 100 Faces Hassan's suspicion, Wuming naturally had a way to prove himself. Wuming waved his hand, and in an instant, a strange black-purple portal opened above his head. The portal instantly freefall and swallowed 100 Faces Hassan at an extremely fast speed. Then, another portal opened above the sandpit. In an instant, a black object fell out of this portal. The former was the entrance, and the latter was the exit. 100 Faces Hassan fell into the sandpit without a doubt. Thump. The sound of an object hitting the ground came from the sandpit. There was no doubt that Wuming transferred 100 Faces Hassan into the sandpit. Only Silent Wonder would be able to use such a strange teleportation gate. It's the real assassin. Godotzi was overjoyed. She threw herself into Wuming's arms. Wuming rubbed Godotzi's little head and let go of her. He looked at everyone rather seriously. The holy city has been attacked. In the center of the holy city, the original holy tower was now in ruins. As if it had been set up by TNT, the entire sacred tower was completely reduced to ruins under the thunderous attack. Not only the holy tower, but the entire holy city was also affected. Houses collapsed, the ground was destroyed, and trees were burning as if they had experienced a natural disaster. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the lightning that struck the holy city was. In the ruins, a burst of mana suddenly burst out, scattering the ruins and wreckage. Wu Ming held Artoria in his left hand and Guinevere in his right. He released his magic power to protect them. When the lightning struck, Wu Ming reacted instantly and took the lead to protect Artoria in front of him. Then, Wu Ming opened a portal at lightning speed and came to Guinevere's side on the lower floor of the Holy Tower. He rescued Guinevere, who was almost knocked out. As for how to avoid the damage caused by the explosion, Wu Ming took advantage of the gap after entering the portal and not coming out. To be honest, if not for Wu Ming's quick reaction, Guinevere would have returned to the Martyr's Palace with the Holy Tower. "Are you okay?" Wu Ming looked at Guinevere with concern. "Master Villo. I'm fine." Although Guinevere was indeed fine, he was definitely shocked. Being suddenly attacked by a missile, and only knowing after being hit, plus being at the scene, anyone would be shocked. "Looks like it's the Sun King's doing." Out of Wu Ming's arms, Artoria looked calmly to the west. Alright, Artoria was a king, and a king would not be scared. The attack just now came from the west where the Sun King was. Then, Artoria frowned and stared at Wu Ming and Guinevere. "How much longer do you want to hug me?" Wu Ming's mouth twitched as he let go of Guinevere's waist. But Guinevere had no intention of letting go. "Ah, Master Villo, I'm so scared." Guinevere, who had his arms around Wu Ming's neck, leaned into Wu Ming's arms and rubbed against Wu Ming's chest. "Ah." Wu Ming did not know if Guinevere was faking it or was really scared. But Wu Ming knew one thing. That was, the veins on Artoria's forehead were popping. But Wu Ming could not push Guinevere away. After all, if he pushed away a cute girl who threw herself at him, he would not be a man. So, Wu Ming immediately changed the topic. "So, after losing the Holy Spear, the entire Holy City has become ordinary?" Artoria nodded matter-of-factly. After all, it was the Holy Spear that supported the defense of the Holy City. After Bedivere returned the Holy Sword to me, Lungaminiad disappeared. It was like dripping ink into water and the water would be assimilated by the ink. It was an irreversible process. But the defense of the Holy City was supported by the Holy Spear. Without the Holy Spear, the Holy City naturally became an ordinary city. The Holy Tower, which was the incarnation of the Holy Spear, also became an ordinary tower after the Holy Spear disappeared. The Sun King really knows how to take advantage of opportunities. Artoria looked in the direction of the Sun King expressionlessly, but the anger in her voice could not be concealed. Anyone would be angry if they were hit while they were down. "He might not be the Sun King anymore," Wu Ming suddenly said. "What do you mean?" Artoria turned her head and looked at Wu Ming expressionlessly. Then, Wu Ming told Artoria his deduction. After thinking for a few seconds, Artoria nodded. "That is indeed a possibility. No wonder the Sun King put aside his pride to cooperate with me." Then, Artoria reached out her hand and grasped the air. An invisible weapon appeared in Artoria's hand. It was the holy sword that withstood the wind enchantment, Excalibur. "How dare you trick me?" Even without the holy spear, the dignity of the Lion King cannot be violated. Artoria glanced at Guinevere, who was still lying in Wu Ming's arms, and said to Wu Ming, "You should be able to use the teleportation ability that I don't know about, right?" Hearing Artoria's words, Wu Ming understood what she meant. "Of course." Wu Ming gave Artoria a reliable smile. "My plan is ruined, but we must continue to save people. Therefore, the person who possessed the Sun King must be dealt with." Logically speaking, after Artoria's holy spear disappeared, the singularity without the support of the Holy Grail and Holy Spear should have begun to repair itself. However, it did not. Without a doubt, this was the work of the Sun King. "As you wish, my king." Of course, Artoria's proactive explanation might also be a bit arrogant. However, Artoria sprayed it all over Wu Ming's face. "Then why are you still hugging my queen? Let's go." Looking at the angry Artoria and the unhappy Guinevere in his arms, Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. Well, there was also a bit of jealousy. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.